Okay.
And action.
Thanks for coming, folks. I'm giving a presentation on the process of creating the first step program strategic plan. Just by way of putting things in a certain frame, I'm not actually talking a whole lot about the results. We've gone over that stuff in other meetings and we address it continually. I'm more talking about the actual process that was undergone in terms of managing the team that produced the strategic plan. So, from the start, Brian and the board identified that we needed a strategic plan. I was asked to project manage, and I brought into this particular project a pretty high level of consultation of the staff group generally, and for that I needed a team. I'll read a little bit from the project proposal here. This project involves a comprehensive consultation of existing staff and volunteers at the First Step program, and based on this consultation, developing a 2-year strategic plan for the organisation. Furthermore, implementation policies and procedures will be developed in order to maximise the success of the plan. Project leader is myself, coordinator of special projects. Project members are Hayden Salmons, clinic manager, and Christopher Charles, intake coordinator. Chris Eliadis, apologies, and that makes me the project supervisor as well, I think. Other stakeholders are clients/patients of the First Step program, their family members, friends of clients, the CEO particularly, who I work quite closely with in this project, and the board and other staff at the First Step program. So one of the initial processes was a gap analysis from which I built a skills matrix. So this was an overview of what skills were needed to complete the project and what team members had the skills that we needed for those particular tasks. So I was identified through this as being able to coach on several of the tasks here and being able to perform others at a high level if not coach. And then Hayden was identified as requiring training for introducing individual surveys for staff who are to complete them, and also for entering individual survey results into spreadsheet for analysis. That was also a task that Chrissa was to be involved with, and she was also identified as needing instruction on that particular task, primarily because I invented the tasks, so I knew them and I was to teach them. I've got an example here of work instructions of one particular task. This is work instructions for Hayden around the task of introducing the survey to individuals. I won't read any of this out. Suffice to say there's a series of steps, the names of what those steps are, descriptions of each of them, and then at the end an indicator of how well those tasks were performed. Some of them merely say good because they're not tasks you could excel at, and some of them did have room for excel, and generally Hayden did that. Now we move on to what you might call the internal project plan, which is about the steps in the organisation that needed to happen in terms of consultation, the various stages of consultation effectively is what this is. So we started with the individual questionnaires that you guys all did, and that all the staff did in the end. And from those individual questionnaires we wanted to produce quantitative results in numbers, and qualitative results for the staff group, and identical for the board group as well. You'll recall maybe the structure of the individual surveys involved looking at a vision of the First Step program and what trends might affect it, external trends, internal trends. Then we did a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Then we went through various goals as identified by the CEO and the board group, which provided the initial structure, values, then actions for each goal, and comments. From that survey that took staff probably an average of about an hour each, some quite a lot quicker, some a little bit slower. We produced, this was Chris's first piece of work, was to produce the quantitative results by entering the details into the spreadsheet. Just a little trip down memory lane. We remember that when we were scoring things, effectively scoring things between 0 and 4 as to how important we thought they were. Anything that comes under the green line meant on average people didn't think it was that important, which might mean they were actually against it, or it might mean they just think it's frivolous. But we had to dig deeper to find those results. But you may recall that opening after hours was a contentious issue that dipped a little bit under, only a little bit. Expanding the range of medical services was another issue that created a little bit of anxiety. We thrashed that out quite a lot. I think it was a very useful conversation. Expanding the range also of psychosocial services. Similarly, dips below the line, the 3 line. And there was anxiety around the legal service on all 4 points, which we identified through further discussion was mainly about funding and concern that funding was going to the legal service that perhaps could have been used for more central services. So that was a very useful conversation as well. So this is a second look at that same consultation plan. We then summarised the qualitative results from those surveys as well. And one way that seemed to work for this process was to break it down into themes. You may recall that there were themes that arose that were not necessarily part of the original structure of the survey, but it was very clear that these are the things that people were concerned about. And I've got some of them listed here. So there was a theme of communication, which is obviously quite a broad area. The theme of consolidation versus expansion was a big one. Should we get bigger? Should we do more things? Or should we concentrate on doing what we do to the best of our ability? It led to a lot of conversation. Measuring impact and efficiency, funding, organisation, partnerships, quality of medical programs, quality of psychosocial programs, our reputation in the drug and alcohol community, staff management and staffing levels separate to staff management. Are the various programs here adequately resourced in terms of staffing? So again, right now I'm not going to go into the intricacies of those arguments. It's a real overview of the kind of structures and processes we went through. A number of corrective action procedures were developed prior to the program to deal with any problems that we thought were likely to occur. One of them was identified as more disagreement than consensus becomes evident, affecting morale. This turned out to be one of the 3 corrective action procedures that we did actually put in place, because this did turn out to be a problem. As we thought, stuff came up, and people disagreed about stuff, and generally, when you have people in a room talking about things, they'll talk about the things they disagree about. They'll focus on that, and so they became bigger in all our minds, and we kind of forgot about what we all had in common. So the corrective procedure for this was to seek to highlight agreement in all available forums, email and staff meetings particularly, but if necessary, produce a document that highlights the consensus issues and refocuses attention on the valuable work we are doing and will continue to do. Ensure that this document is read and discussed. So you may recall that I produced what we stand for. It was a 2 or I think maybe 3-page document, which turned out to be pretty interesting, and I think it did have a positive effect on morale. We're like, oh, that's right, that's what we're into. And that then actually became the standard part of our induction package as well. Moving along further down the project/consultation plan, I might just take 2 steps back. Once those themes were identified, they formed the core of conversations, which were facilitated by Hayden. That's an area that I trained him in and that he performed. We had group consultations, a couple with the nurses. We had admin consultations, board consultations, general staff consultations. And they were used to further refine the results of the individual surveys. So once those results had been refined, the next task was to present a summary and a detail of the various options being proposed by the staff group to the CEO. So a document, quite a lengthy document, was produced to do that. As I recall, it was maybe about 12 pages, each one of which looked a little bit like this. This is just one of the goals, and this is the possible actions that can take place. This is actually after Brian worked on it, Brian the CEO. Things were made in yellow that Brian wanted to keep in the plan. And as it turned out, that from all the things that were presented to him, he decided to keep about 95% of it. Everything was allocated a person of primary responsibility, and also staff members would be involved, and a time frame. All of which went through the strategic plan. We then developed the action matrix, which we can actually see just on the wall here, Anthony, if you want to just see how this sits up on the wall, and we all spend hours poring over it every single day. And it's also here on the screen, and this is the means of embedding particularly the process of performing the actions, completing the actions into the way the organisation functions. There's also policies and procedures for the strategic plan were developed, particularly around, once again, not just having a strategic plan that will sit in a drawer, but a strategic plan that will be an active document that we're working on continually. The matrix is part of it, and regular staff meetings where we particularly address whichever actions were meant to be completed by that stage are all part of the communications document. And there's not much else. Bang, strategic plan, which we've all seen, which we've had for a little while now, which we've been working on. We produced two versions, a private internal version that has the dates in it and people responsible, and a public version of the strategic plan that just has the goals, strategies and actions without personalising or putting time frames in it. And that essentially is the project. Thanks a lot for your help with it. Thanks for listening to me today. Does anyone have any particular questions at the moment? Does it all make perfect sense? Perfect sense? Great. Thanks, Anthony.
And